All right, welcome to Unit 2 review. We're going to go through the answers, and I'm going to kind of fly through some of them, and I may skip a couple for sake of time, but I hope this helps you in studying for your Chapter 2 or Unit 2 test. So we're going to start with the first one, right? So it contains, write the equation, I forgot the directions above, but it says write the equation of a line that contains the points 7, -5, and 1, -2. So first step, find the slope, which if you remember is that. So I'm going to do -2 minus -5. Turn to a positive over 1 minus 7. That gives me a slope of 3 over -6, which is -1/2. So I have step 1. Step 2 is to pick one of the points. I usually pick the first one and write the equation. So if you recall, we often have to use point slope form because we don't know the intercept. So I'm going to write y minus, my y coordinate's -5, so that turns into a positive, equals my slope is 1/2, -1/2. X minus 7, and I would not do anything further. I wrote the equation of a line, that's all it asked me. Now this one's even easier. It's got a slope of -1, a y-intercept of -4, and the reason I put this on there is because I want you guys to not overthink. You should know this equation from the beginning of middle school, okay, or I guess the end maybe for some of you. M is slope, B is y-intercept. So all I have to do is write y equals -1x minus 4, and I'm done with that one. I know the intercept, so I don't need to write in point slope form. Now we get to some tougher ones. And the reason I put this one on is because I want you to remember what perpendicular means. So when you get to number 4, you remember what perpendicular bisector is. So they give me an equation, and all I'm concerned about is the slope of 8. So the perpendicular slope is going to be negative, and it's the reciprocal, so it'll be 1 over 8. Okay? And then so when I go to write the equation, I just take this point, and that's x, y. Again, I'm going to write it in point slope form. So I'm going to write y minus 6, because that's my y coordinate, equals my slope, -1/8, times x minus 0. And you don't really need the x minus 0, but I'm going to put it in there just so everyone sees how we got the equation. And I would leave it at that because you are done. Right? Last type of line question is the big one, perpendicular bisector. And I'm sure I've told you guys star it. You saw it on a quiz. You'll probably see on the test because I can test you on multiple things in this problem. So perpendicular bisector, step 1. Find the slope. So I'm going to do 4 minus 5 and 3 minus a -2. So my slope is -1 over 5. The second thing then is it says perpendicular. So the perpendicular slope is going to be 5. Or if you wanted to write over 1, I don't like fractions, so I'm just going to leave it as 5. Now graphically what's happening here is I have the point -2, 5. And I have the point 3, 4. I want to find a segment that's perpendicular to it, but also cuts it in half. So I want it to meet at a right angle, and I want that to be the midpoint. So you guys can probably guess the second step is to find the midpoint. Right, if you recall that formula, it's x1 plus y, oops, goodness, it's been a long day. X1 plus x2 divide 2, comma y1 plus y2 divide 2, or in other words, add your x's divided by 2, add your y's. So I'm going to do -2 plus 3 divided by 2, and that gives me 1/2. And then I'm going to do 5 plus 4 divided by 2, and that gives me 9/2. And you could write those as decimals if you wanted as well, right? So I've got my slope. Here's the key. My perpendicular slope, and I have my midpoint. So now the last step is write the equation in point slope form. So I see my slope still. Y minus, that's 4.5, so you could write 4.5 or 9/2 equals 5 times x minus 0.5, or you could leave it as a fraction. And again, I wouldn't simplify it because then you run the risk of making more errors. I've written the equation. They asked me. Key thing is you need to find the perpendicular slope and the midpoint, all right? So the next one is the same thing. Again, graphically speaking, we have the point -4, 3, And we're trying to find the perpendicular bisector. So what that means is I'm trying to find a line that's perpendicular and also cuts it in half so that this segment is equal to that side, right? So step 1, find the slope. 7 minus 3 over 2 minus a negative 4, which equals 4 over 6, and I'm going to simplify that to 2/3. Okay, next, it says we want it to be perpendicular. We need to find the opposite reciprocal slope, which is going to be negative 3/2. That's our key, right? Step 2, find the midpoint. Again, add your x's, so negative 4 plus 2 are both my x coordinates, and you can write x1, y1, x2, y2 if that helps. Divided by 2, and 3 plus 7 divided by 2. So my midpoint is negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1, and 10 over 2 is 5. There's my thing. So my 2 box things is the only thing I need to write an equation. Step 3 then is to give me that equation, and again, point slope form. So I'm going to write y minus 5 equals, my slope is negative 3/2 times x minus negative 1, which would turn into a plus. And again, I would not simplify that any further. I would just leave it like that. All right. And this last one is kind of an easy problem now that we've done the last one. It says find the midpoint M if the two endpoints are 12, 0, and negative 8, 10. So it's not like the one on your test where you had to put the middle, you knew the midpoint. This one you just add your x's, divide by 2. Add your y's, divide by 2, and you get the midpoint to be 2, negative 5. Right, that's not one I would study because you already did that in 5 and 4, right? All right, let's finish up these. This one should be in your notes already. So alternate interior angles, I'm just going to give you one example of each, would be D and E. There are other ones. You can look at the key for other ones. Alternate exterior would be something like A and H or B and G. They're outside the parallel lines. Corresponding are the easiest, and here's how I do corresponding. I take this, I draw it in, and I say, all right, it's just like going down a level of the house or an elevator. A corresponds with E because it's in the same spot, it's up the upper corner. B corresponds with F because it's in the same spot. C and G correspond, and D and H correspond. So I'm just going to write one example, A and E. Vertical angles are the next easiest, and I use the words across from. So that would be ones like B and C. Okay, E and H would be vertical. And you can check the key for some other ones, but F and G and D and A would be the other vertical pairs. They're across from each other, and that means they are equal or congruent. Corresponding angles are also equal, but this last one, a linear pair, that means they add to 180. And you'll see on the key, I wrote lots of them. All you're looking for on these is lines. So A and B lie on a line. C and D are also on that line. Okay, and I could also do something like F and H because that's the line they lie on. So there's tons of linear pairs in here, and that's going to help you on your test because linear pairs you can find a lot of pretty quickly, right? So let's look at this one. We look at this and we say, all right, I know Miss Marlin told me to spread one of the angles around everywhere I can, so I'm going to pick this one. That would be a vertical angle, right? Then if I moved this one down using corresponding, it would be in this bottom corner. So it'd be 4x plus 30, that's corresponding. And I notice that now I have a pair of vertical angles here. All right, so I know that 4x plus 30, that angle is the same as 6x minus 20. They're vertical, so I'm going to set up my equation. Since they're vertical here, I know that they're equal. Vertical angles are equal, so now I just need to solve this. I'm going to subtract 4x. 2x minus 20 equals 30. Add 20. So I get 2x equals 50. So x is 25. Now you can always check the reasonableness of your answer by going back up here and plugging it in. So 4 times 25 is 100, plus 30 is 130. 6 times 25 is 150, minus 20 is also 130. And you see how big that angle is? It's bigger than 90, so it makes reasonable sense that it's 130 degrees. Now, you don't have to do that, but that's just to check to see on a test, did I really get the right answer? If your number's off, you'll be able to tell when you plug it back in, right? This one you should have down like the back of your hand, except a lot of people today were going, but it says 2x. So I saw lots of people doing this and that because those are alternate interiors. So I added in this third parallel line. So these two are alternate interior, okay? And these two are alternate interior. So lots of people put their answer to be 77, but I know that that's equal to 2x. So the end you have to divide by 2. So in x equals 77 divided by 2 is 38.5. If it said 77 equals 3x, at the end you would just have to divide by 3 and so on, right? So we get to the very last one on the first page. This one kind of gives you a hint of the big problem on your test. It's smaller than the big ones that are on the back of your packet, but it's bigger than the other ones that you've seen. So I'm going to just go ahead and find my vertical angles. So 58 and number 3 are vertical angles. And I like to fill in all my angles even if they don't help me. So I'm going to put 70 there. Now I'm going to start looking for my linear pairs. So I see that 70 and this angle lie on a line. So that must mean this is 110, because 180 minus 70 is 110. And I now know that 5, those two are vertical angles, right? Now the tricky part is getting angle 6 or getting angle 4. You have to use your words, corresponding, alternate interior, vertical. So I'm going to draw a little V there and say that I know that angle 4 is 70. And that's because 4 and 70 are corresponding, right? Now that I know that, okay, I'm going to also argue that I can find 6. So look at that little red angle. This is my transversal, and these angle M and N are lines M and N are parallel. So 58 and the angle next to 6 are corresponding. So that has to be 58. So your last step would be to subtract from 180. So I'm left with 102 is 60. Let me just check that. All right, it is 122. So I got angle 6. Right? Now the last thing would be to find 1, 2, 1 and 2. And I can find 1 by looking at vertical angles with this 70. So here's the trick on this one. Again, I said keep your eye out for linear pairs. I see a line here. Now it doesn't matter if I have 2 angles on the line, 4, 7. Okay, I have 3 angles right now, and all 3 of these have to add to 180 degrees. So I'm going to do 180. I'm going to subtract the 58, and I'm going to subtract the 70. So I should be left with my angle, which will get me 52 degrees. So I know that angle 2 is 52. So if I were to add up all 3 of these, that should add to 180. So if I go across, that should also be 52. Another way I could have done that is by looking at this one. This shape right here is a triangle. So I could have done 180 again because it's a triangle and I have 58 and 70 already, right? So there are multiple ways to get these problems, and that's the point. Okay, you can find the easiest way for yourself. All right, so that's the end of page 1. I'm going to split this video up, so look at the next video if you want to do page 2.